Welcome to Season 1, Episode 17 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today, we're kicking off the most ambitious week we've ever had on the show, and we're covering the Firefly verse in 3 full episodes. Today, we're joined by Jesse and Ricky D from the Sudden but Inevitable Rewatch, a feature of the Twist My Arm podcast family. Our special guests are helping us break down the 2002 series that helped us kick off one of the best iterations of sci-fi ever attempted.
But before we talk about pretty bonnets, cunning knitted caps, Capison 38 Mark II engines, puddles of piss that won't pay us our wage, or the chain that I go get and beat you with until you understand who's in charge here. We are Joe and Mark, two dudes who love talking about the Firefly verse and spent over 9 hours recording content about it for one massive special guest week. After you listen to the show today, please visit our friends at the Twist My Arm podcast. They've covered not only the Firefly verse, but have also branched into The Mandalorian and plan to cover more properties in the near future. If you got here by accident, though, and don't know much about our show, try searching for us on all major podcast platforms by typing in Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast. If you're not following podcast websites, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter by searching for @DigitalDissect1. Our social media sites share more pop culture news and current information, so feel free to join the conversation over there. We once again want to thank our friends Jesse and Ricky D of the Twist My Arm family, and hope you enjoy our breakdown of the Firefly verse. We're very happy that we can be joined by the Sudden but Inevitable Rewatch podcast as we're kicking off our Firefly verse week here on the Digital Dissection podcast. But how are you guys doing? We're joined by Jesse and Ricky. How's stuff going tonight for you?
Very good. It's been a good night. I'm excited to talk Firefly. Good place to be in the middle of the week.
Yeah, and I just like to comment and enjoy. I'm sorry, I cut you off. You go ahead. Right in the middle of the introduction, I just ran right in there.
I'm in the same boat as Ricky. It's been a great week. It has been busy, but I had my second shot today, so I'm hoping that when I wake up tomorrow, I won't feel awful. But if I do, at least I'll know I've got a great podcast in the can ready to listen to.
There we go. Yeah, I've been having fun with my students calling the COVID shots a software update because of the tracking chips in them.
I dig it.
Yep. So when Jesse.exe fails, it will reboot eventually when the software update takes. But I've been enjoying, we're doing this on video. You can't see because it's a podcast. That's not how they work because, all the nerd that's like in the background of everyone in this meeting, I've been really enjoying.
Too bad I can't flip my camera around because there's much more in front of me than there is in back.
I purposefully kind of block out what's behind me because like where my hands are, there's like 3 or 4 bookshelves just covered in nerdgasm over there. So yeah, fortunately you don't have to see that, but tell you what, we're actually just really interested in hearing a little bit more about the origins of your podcast, because obviously, hats off to you for, talking to Adam Baldwin, and that's a really just awesome achievement for you guys. Yeah. So we were interested to understand a little bit more about your podcast and introduce you to our audience. So if you could give us a little bit of background history.
Well, Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D, if I may. The way that this kind of all got started was my friend Josh. I've known Josh since I think we decided 6 or 7, whatever age you are when first grade starts. We met each other on the first day of first grade, and we've been friends ever since. And so to be, 32 years old with a friend you've known for 25 years is like mind blowing. So Josh has been doing podcasting for a long time. He started the Twist My Arm podcast network. And so basically I had been with him on and off for a while, and I was in an off point, and the pandemic was just, getting ramped up. And I had recently discovered a renewed love for podcasts. So I had been listening to so much stuff at work with all of the time that I had to listen. And so I sent Josh a text and was like, hey man, how's your podcast doing? Like, let's do a podcast together again. And he was like, that's so crazy. I was just thinking about I'd like to do one, but I don't know what to do. I'm feeling, I'm losing the energy on this one. So I said, okay, well, let's do a bunch of research and like figure out how to actually make a huge show that's really popular. Like let's do this the right way. And so we did. We went for like 2 months. We just did tons and tons of research on how to build an audience, how to maintain engagement, that kind of thing. And so then Josh texted me I think it was a Thursday, and was like, hey, The Mandalorian is coming out. Will you do a podcast with me about it tomorrow so that it's the same day it comes out? And then I'll get somebody else because I know you're not a huge Star Wars fan. So it's like, sure, let's do a series on The Mandalorian. And we ended up calling it Quest Me because he's like, for some reason, he uses quest as like a verb in that, like, I've been quested, right?
Yeah.
And so we started talking about this show, and it's very cool in space western, and we had Ricky D join us he was in our live chat for a long time, and then one day we were like, hey man, put up or shut up, come be on the show. And he was like, I'll be there. So we kind of adopted him, and he's been in our podcasting orbit ever since.
I started out doing everything from my phone. I would just join in with the phone camera and the phone microphone, and now I've got microphones and speakers and preamps and all kinds of business.
And his own show, Best Flicks with Ricky D, not to mention. But I kept pointing out these little things in Mandalorian where I was like, man, this really reminds me of Firefly. And Ricky D's like, yeah, definite Firefly vibes, very space western. And Josh kept going, yeah, I've never seen that. So we were like, okay, that's sort of a problem. Like, you as a Star Wars fan should have seen that, right? I think you should have seen that. So we're like, what's the next thing? What do we do when this is over? And where do we apply all this knowledge that we've gained through all this research and stuff? And I was like, dude, I know exactly where we're going next. We're going Firefly. It'll be called the Sudden But Inevitable Rewatch. We'll take you through it one episode at a time. You've never seen it. We've both seen it. We'll get your reactions. It'll be like introducing a friend to the show, because that's literally what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it'll have that level of accessibility for old fans and new fans and people that have never heard of it, or people that heard of it but didn't want to give it a shot, So it's like, it just kind of came together in this perfect way of like, this is something that everybody knows the feeling of, right? Is trying to get somebody to watch the thing you like and like it with you.
I mean, I had that same experience with the Pokemon movie and Mark.
Yeah,
I lost him. Like, believe it or not, he did not make it through Pikachu's Vacation. Don't know why.
Well, mostly
the original.
Yeah, the original, the first one.
The reason that this happened, Joe isn't mentioning the app. There's important information here. Okay, Joe wanted me to watch this at like 3 a.m. and I'm like, dude,
yes.
What? I mean, come on. How am I supposed to stay up watching this at 3 a.m.? It's just Pokemon yelling.
Oh, you'll be sobbing by 4:15 a.m.
Oh yeah, when Charizard gets broken out of that weird furnace thing and get his head stuck in.
It sounds like Joe might be the Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D of your podcast.
It could be, and I hope we find that out as we continue on. But that's awesome, dude. Like I listened to like half of the season for your Sudden But Inevitable stuff here, so we don't want to necessarily rehash everything that you covered within that, but at the same time, I think it is a good idea to talk about Firefly as a property, because like you mentioned, Jesse, there's a chance that there are people out there that haven't watched it, or maybe they're like me with The Office and they just don't want to watch it out of spite, and you know what, that happens. Okay,
yeah, it happens.
But yeah, you know what? The one thing I want to talk about to start this off, as far as Firefly goes, is the fact that Fox just absolutely loves to fuck up shows. It's just something their executives, they look at a show and they go, you know what? I love the idea. I love the actors. How can we fuck this up?
Yeah, it's an original concept. Hasn't been done before. It's brilliant. I fucking hate it.
One of my most exciting moments during this entire our Sudden But Inevitable is the very first episode. We were talking about how out of order and how screwed up everything was, and I declared that Clay Aiken killed Firefly. I said it was all about American Idol and these cheap shows that are easy, these cheap reality shows, and those are taking over, and Firefly just won't be able to run up against that. And then on our interview with Adam Baldwin, he said that American Idol killed Firefly, and I lost my mind.
Yeah. Well, wait, Ryan Seacrest is the
Validation.
Grim Reaper. I think we all know this. The man comes on, he's way too handsome for his own good, and everyone dies as a result of it.
Well, and I could understand, not to be, and I'm not defending Fox, trust me, but like, if you were, let's say it was the Lifetime Network, and the Lifetime Network was like, just Firefly doesn't really fit with anything on our network, I would be like, okay, yeah, that's fair. Maybe see if you could sell it to, Sci-Fi or Fox or Hulu, But with Fox, one of the things that we got in aforementioned interview with Adam Baldwin, who played Jane Cobb on the television show Firefly, he was very gracious about it. He was like, look, the network went a different way. They wanted to curate this image, and McG was very big at the time, and he did a great job. And it was like, he's saying very gracious things, and it's like, as I was thinking about it, though, I was like, what image did Fox curate outside of, to Ricky D's point, hey, we're a reality competition network now. So it's like, I understand that doesn't fit, but the other part of my brain is like, shouldn't you want to have multiple audiences? Like, we want the reality competition audience and the sci-fi audience, right? Like,
The
isn't that
board
benefit of
mom
big network
audience.
TV? Yeah. And if
The
you're a
board
huge
mom audience
network-
is something to go up against.
Well, and I
here's the-
mean,
yeah.
there's plenty in Firefly for the board moms, right? I mean,
Jane alone. I mean,
oh yeah, in all the main cast.
The AB gets topless, and like, you're not turning that off.
Oh yeah,
No one would.
They're popping those shirt offs like Matthew McConaughey, literally anywhere he goes. But when you talk about audiences, though, guys, like what's interesting about Firefly, I remember one of the earliest commercials for this show that I saw and this is, we're dialing back 18, 19 years here. So I had a lot more hair, and people thought I was actually adorable back then. But when we think about the commercials talked about Firefly as the most twisted new show on television. And the commercial was dubbed with Smash Mouth's Walking on the Sun. And so I'm watching this going, all right, you know what? It's fine. Smash Mouth is okay even for back then. Like, we still thought they were cool. But
that was
then
the only time it was okay for Smash Mouth.
You go Smash Mouth now, that's questionable. You're losing your job. You even suggest it.
Yeah.
Well, here's the rest of the moniker for the commercial, though. It says, what do you get with a cowboy, a space hooker, and a girl in a box? And then, who's flying this thing? Like, that's the ad for the show. I mean, that's literally what the ad for the show was. And the whole a girl in a box thing, there's like 3 commercials where they bring that up. They're talking about River Tam being in a box, and they go, this is like not even like a minute of content from the first episode that we don't end up seeing until the end of the year.
They didn't show that scene. Like, on the original airing, it was cut over for time, and it was just like, okay.
I think they were just banking on the sexuality of a naked teenager in a box. That's what they were shoving down your throats in the commercials, and that's what they wanted you to come for.
And that probably worked on a specific audience
for one episode,
right?
or so.
Well, right, but that brought in the the middle school guys that were like, what if Star Wars had even more bikinis in it? And it's like, the show really isn't that. But if they sell it that way, I could see why 13-year-old boys would be like, cool, I'm in. But it's like, I don't know. I could see why they would sell it that way, but to me, it just lends further credence to the idea that the network executives just didn't understand the show, right? Like, they were like, here are the constituent parts. It's up to you to make those into something more. And it's like, no, it's way more than that. And the whole thing is there. But when you pick it apart like that, then it doesn't look like much. I'll be honest, if I were 13, that ad would get me to watch. If I were my current age, that would get me to laugh. So,
well, and it definitely split people down the middle, like an advertising butt crack. We've got people that go, okay, so this is a twisted show, and then they tune in and they're like, oh, I don't like this at all. This isn't twisted. You got your leather daddies out there turning in, and they're like, yeah, this is not what I saw on that one ad.
No, I can't get off to this. This doesn't make any sense at all.
Oh, yeah.
This is way too straight-laced for me.
Yeah, I can't jack off to this.
I do have a question, though, because I think this would be an interesting thing. What do you think the most twisted show was on TV in 2002?
2002.
What even would
Most
it have
twisted.
been? Like, I can't even think of something.
Seventh Heaven.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
really
Yep.
fucked up show. Yeah.
Mhm.
But, like anything that
crap.
was marketed as like this is twisted. Like I can't even
Like,
remember
nothing's
that.
coming to mind. No.
Fear Factor.
Fear Factor,
Oh, there you
maybe.
go. Yeah.
Mad TV, because they tried being edgy. Or were they even
Oh,
there
yeah.
that long? Did they make it to 2002? Yeah, I think they did. They
I
had
think
to
they
have.
did. Yeah.
Well,
I-
it wasn't Millennium, the TV show Millennium was out at that point in time, I think, or maybe that was a little bit later. I'm trying to remember when that came out.
The new
No,
Millennium?
that was earlier. Millennium was actually mid '90s. So no, that's even before then. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know what else would be twisted at that point. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously.
it would
And
have
on
to be
network
Fear
TV?
Factor. Yeah.
Yeah. Network TV,
Which-
nothing could be that twisted.
Well, to
No.
be fair, I
Mhm.
find Fear Factor like
No.
deeply offensive. Like I can't. Like you're prostituting these people and you're pretending not to. I can't deal with that show.
hmm
Yeah, I mean, this is just the whole reasoning for why Firefly was destined to fail from the beginning, right? Like, so we've already got this mismanaged marketing campaign going on, and the show hasn't even aired yet. But then we've got the Friday death slot that Fox just sends shows to die,
Yeah.
and I just want to know if like an executive at Fox found Joss Whedon in the hallway and just said, "You're breaking my heart," and then kissed him and then sent him away. And it's like, "Yep, your show's going to get canceled in a couple weeks here," because that's what it felt like from the beginning. It's
Yeah,
like,
you can't start a show on Friday night with any real hope of it working. That's where like your show has been going on for maybe 2 or 3
Mhm.
seasons and things just aren't working out. And so you put them there so you're breaking up with them in a nice way without just like canning them before you even they can write a finale. They at least know moving to Friday means this isn't working. But Firefly just started there. That's not even fair.
And it
Yeah,
started
yeah.
there at a time when it wasn't like there was nothing else where people were like, you know what, I'm gonna stay in, because to
Mhm.
that point, like our show, The Sudden But Inevitable Rewatch, has been live every Friday night concurrent with a pandemic. So we've had
Yeah.
live viewers every night, and we're also not a big budget, television show, but it's like they just put it in this spot that's like, how many people are watching TV on Friday night? And that is the only part of their original stupid decisions I think that makes sense, when they went, okay, if it's going to be on Friday night, you can't have a 2-hour pilot. Like,
Yeah.
at least that part of the logic is understandable,
Yeah.
but I don't forgive them for that still.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, one of the things that I thought was just absolutely batshit from the beginning was that the show almost didn't even happen because Fox was upset about Wash and Zoe being married. And
Really?
Is it
yeah,
interracial? Is that the issue?
well, I don't want to call the folks at Fox racists, but so
You
there
would be
was
the first.
well, there was a story about an executive and Joss Whedon pretty much arguing with each other, and Joss goes, "Well, my show is going to have these people married. If you don't want them married, then don't pick up the show." So they thought about it for a little bit, and after a little while, yeah, they just decided, okay, he's not going to move on from this. All right, let's just let it happen.
But funny
No,
story, let's put a show on Friday night right away.
yeah. You can keep that damn marriage, but you know what? We're gonna fuck you from day one, and
that's a shame, because as I have pointed out several times over the course of our rewatch, Zoe, played just
Gina Torres.
masterfully by Gina Torres, is
Yes.
the best fictional cowboy character that there is, in my opinion. So like to me, for them to almost go, for this one petty reason we're kind of thinking maybe no, is like, I'm so grateful that we got even as much as we did, because that, to me, that character is up there in that pantheon. Like it's Zoe Washburn and probably John Wayne. Like that's it.
yeah,
And I don't really like John Wayne, but like I get it. So
yeah. Well, John Wayne was basically just his generation's Nick Cage, if you really break it down. You know,
Oh, no.
When you look at it, yeah.
he's a guy that gets into a ton of financial problems, and then he's just making a bunch of shitty movies. Like that's the same thing. I mean,
Yep. And then suddenly you're
Oh, that
Genghis
makes me
Khan in the
so
desert.
happy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just wait. Nick Cage is going to have his name on the side of an airport at some point. You just wait. It's going to happen. Yeah, but no, to your point though, Jesse. Yeah, Zoe Washburn. She's like one of the best characters in this show. I mean,
Mhm.
she's like Gina Torres was like brilliant from her deadpan delivery. You know, just being a strong character. And yeah, dude, I honestly don't know what a show would look like with her and Wash not being a couple. I mean, they balance each other out so well.
Yeah.
And
Gina's
it's so
serious,
essential.
ass kickery, and Wash is playing with dinosaur toys and trying not to get them killed by flying.
Well, it's essential to not only their relationship, but so many other relationships on the show. Like, that's your main source of tension for Mal and Wash. It's your main source of misunderstanding between like any character that hasn't been there before, right? They're like, oh, are they, oh, no, she's married to okay. Like, so yeah, I'm lamenting that we could have had more, but I'm like super grateful that we did get what we got because man, she is. I said I think the phrase I repeatedly always fall back on for her is she's just a vision of serenity, like the grace and beauty with which she does everything, despite being in chaps and holding a shotgun, is overwhelming.
Well, it kind of adds to a laundry list of things that Fox wanted to really screw up, because they also thought that the show needed more violence, but not in the sense where it needed to be violent from every direction. They wanted Malcolm Reynolds to shoot more people. They just thought the idea of Mal, you know, just delivering justice was an image that needed to be all over this property. And honestly, I just want to know where he would have an opportunity to shoot more people at this point because
He shot
I
a lot
mean,
of people.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah, he already did that. It was
Well,
kind of
and
his thing.
he could kill more people, but I think
Mhm.
that would change the character pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Like he could have killed Patience, he could have
Mhm.
killed Niska, he could have killed the operative. Like there's a lot of people that were threats that he could have chosen to kill and had the opportunity to kill, but I think the point of the character, I think for me, it's like Fox is always like, okay, so this is the Han Solo, which in this one case is fair,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Yeah.
like, no, this is the best possible version of Han Solo. This is Han Solo with like a background and like,
Ethics.
Yeah.
ethics and logic and reasoning. Like,
And on top of that, sharp wit, his moral compass is what really, like, draws people to the character because he's supposed to be from like the eyes of what the central planets. Like he was a brown coat, like he was on the wrong side of the war. He's more or less the bad guy who can't get over the fact that he lost a war, but yet he is such a well morally grounded character where he shows and disproves that like idea of who he's supposed to be at every given opportunity.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
dude,
think for
yeah.
me, that is always captured. I think it's the train job episode where they steal some stuff and it turns out to be medicine for like the local folks. And the sheriff is like, hey, so I recognize that you figured out what was going on and then you had a choice to make. So I appreciate you making the correct choice. And Mal basically tells him there's
No,
no
it didn't.
choice to
Believe I
make
did.
there.
Yep.
That's just you do the right thing, Now with Han Solo, I feel like he would have gone, but I don't know. I haven't watched Solo because out of
See-
spite, as you mentioned earlier. So
Well, that the thing you just mentioned about how there's not a choice to make here, I equate it to using your foot to press the lever in a public restroom. Okay, there is no choice. You do that every
Yeah.
time.
it's policy.
And
It's the right
it's
thing to
yes,
do.
it's what you do. And
You're like,
honestly,
why do you put your arms on your chest and try to create a cup for water in the shower? Because you got it.
Do it every time.
Yeah.
Oh
'cause
my
you got
god.
it.
Yeah. Well, to Joe's point, okay, this is something that I thought I don't think people miss this, but it's something that I don't know if everyone really enunciates, okay? And it's how that sense of family that Mal brings to the team. it's not just family in the sense that, oh yeah, I'd do anything for you, bro, or yeah, if you need $5, I'll lend it to you. No, what family really is on Firefly, it's about, let's just use the example of when Kaylee is looking at the dress in the shop window, and Mal makes fun of her, saying, why do you want to look like a sheep on its hind legs? That's what family to me is when you realize you made a huge mistake in saying that.
Mm-hmm.
It may have just seemed like empty words, but he comes back later and he apologizes to her and brings her the dress. Like, to me, that's what the sense of family on Firefly always was. It's the kind of stuff that you and I would probably do
Mhm.
with our own families, where we know we fucked up, we did something stupid,
Mhm.
and we come
Yep.
back together later. And
Mm-hmm.
because a
And
lot of times on TV, yeah.
they
Oh, go ahead.
fight.
Yeah.
They're a
Yeah.
family. They
They
fight with
bicker.
each other, and that's like, I'm not to give you too big a peek behind the curtain or anything, but we always
Mhm.
talk about how we, the crew, feel like a family because of our show and our fans that have supported us. And you can hear it on the podcast. Like, there are times that we disagree with each other because we're so comfortable calling each other out and just being
Mhm.
like, you know what, I'm gonna poke at you for the sake of it, not because I'm actually trying to make a point now. But like, that's kind of what I love about that crew is I like to make the comparison, or the contrast rather, to the Next Generation crew, where everybody's a professional and they all voice each other's opinions, and then the captain goes, I've considered everything and I think this is the answer. This is more of
Mhm.
like, I will take all of your opinions into account, and there's a pretty solid chance I will still disregard all of them, but I
Mhm.
will make you feel heard. Now, as a new dad, my first daughter is 2 years old. Um, so I'm learning that family balance. When do you take the family's input into account, and when do you say, I hear what you're all saying, I love you. We're not gonna stop right now. We're gonna drive to the next exit, and then we'll all go to the bathroom. Everything's gonna be fine. It's like, because I know that they're comfortable enough with me to go, hey, if we don't stop now, there's going to be a problem. And I know they don't really mean that, but they know that if they say it, I'm going to feel bad. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's dynamics there that I think really come across in the crew, to your point, that kind of don't come across in a lot of other shows, especially
Mhm.
even shows about family. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
my biggest thing with current sitcoms, is like, none of these families feel like families. They all feel like a bunch of very cool teenagers in the same high school, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fine, but it's not realistic. Like,
No.
And,
No.
and that's why I think Firefly excels as a science fiction show, because it's set 500 years into the future, right? But it doesn't feel that foreign to us, because the issues of, the quote unquote Wild West that a lot of folks love to use to describe this show, the whole idea of Firefly is the fact that Earth got used up and we had to move into other planets, terraform them, and essentially start back over from zero. So it's interesting to think that some of the problems that we saw through, whether it's like through reading a history book, or just some of the societal issues that you and I just mentioned with family and trying to navigate that together, I don't really think those things change that much in 500 years.
No, and I mean, now I can even remember, like, being in a car with Mark and his family, and he and his wife having a disagreement, and Mark just turns back and says, "Hey, if you think you can drive this car better than me," and Kate says, "Yes," and Mark just kind of waits there and says, "Well,
You
you
can't.
can't."
Oh man, that's good. But seriously though, I mean, I think that's what once again, this is one of the strengths of a series that we only got for 14 episodes, is that I think the issues that these people are going through, I just don't think they could be that crazy different from things we've seen either in our lives or just some of this historical context that we have. But
well,
ultimately though, yeah, go ahead.
to your point, Mark, the other thing is that it's like, yeah, you have that, the family thing that stays relevant, and the difference is not going to be that much different in 500 years with like how people relate to one another. But I think the essence of what makes this show so relatable and recognizable as a potential modern future is the economics of it, right? Because it's these people are constantly struggling economically, and there are certainly the haves and the have-nots here, and they're definitely
Oh
presented
yes.
in a very
Mhm.
straightforward, wealth is bad, scrapping is good sort of a thing. So and I think that that's kind of like brown coat is the same as blue collar, right? Like it's
Yeah.
easy to see where people could identify with that on an economic level too. And I think you're 100% correct to call out that the themes of the show seem to be where a lot of its staying power and strength comes from, despite being this tiny little temporary thing.
Well, I think it's important to mention that for a little bit here, because that's one of the things about this series is that once Earth got used up, we basically had these remaining superpowers. So we had, essentially the Asiatic areas of the world, and then we had the Americas that were still there. So I thought it was interesting though that despite the fact that you see like Mandarin being spoken everywhere and a lot of these Asian influences, the future seems to be still very white, doesn't it? I mean, there's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of
There
there's not a-
was a lot of effort put into a lot of all of that background, make sure there's a lot of Asian influences, that kind of thing, and then just a whole lot of white faces.
And 2 black assassins throughout the
true.
whole franchise.
And
It's very true.
and like you have two characters in the main cast whose surname is Tam. And
Yeah.
so the point that we
Honky.
brought up was like I could get if they were using it to be like, no, the point is that Tam is like Smith now, right? Like the two cultures are so homogenized, right? That it's just everybody is a Tam now, and it's but it's like that's also pretty clearly just an explanation for a very
Yeah.
lazy attempt at not going out and finding actual Mandarin speakers. Because guess what? That would make a lot of your translations probably way easier to get done. Just a thought.
Yeah. To me, it's like Khan Noonien Singh being a Caucasian, right?
Or
Like those
yeah.
those that name doesn't really go together with a guy that probably uses the non-dairy creamer, but
I think-
whatever.
I think Ricardo Montalban can play any race.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting about Firefly is basically the rise of the professional sex worker and how that became an industry, because I know some folks have talked about before how Inara kind of feels like a Swiss Army knife of intelligence, and how would she get there? Like, how does this character get to this place? And so the whole idea of the companion, the quote unquote companion, easier way of saying sex worker, I thought that was an interesting take that they roped into this series, that we've gone from, I mean, looking at these types of folks as I don't know, you see it a lot in these serial killer documentaries where the police are always dismissing sex workers.
Yep.
But now we've completely flipped the script on this, and they're respected members of society,
Powerful.
powerful, educated. I
Well,
mean,
to
Stylish.
me, I think that it's the one of the more direct reflections that they put in of like the Western frontier, right? Because when you have the frontier towns popping up, that's hard work, that's gonna need to be done by roughnecks and probably mostly guys, because they're gonna be like, I don't want no chicks on my boat. So when you have a whole town full of angry dudes who've been working real hard, as we saw in Heart of Gold, you gotta have the local entertainment industry has to keep up, right? So
yeah,
I think it's interesting that they went from, to your point, they went from we're always ignored to now it's been commodified. But I
yeah,
think it still doesn't quite reach that level of empowerment for me because of that commodification, I think. Because it's like, yeah, she has influence, Inara has influence and stuff, but she's also still beholden to like the restrictions of the Citadel or the Guild or whatever it is that she calls it. I think it's the Guild.
yeah,
And it's like, so there's still somebody over her who's in charge of, client lists or a client registry or something. There's still something going on there. And she still is too often reduced to the sexual prize, for Atherton or Mal, ostensibly, even though we know that's not the case. But it's like, I I I guess you have to give the series credit for making an attempt, right?
yeah.
But if it were written now, that wouldn't be enough. She would need to be like, oh, I actually run the guild, and the guild is only women, and it's volunteer basis. You know what I mean? Like it would have to be tweaked to fit currently, I think. but I think it could be done.
I also think that part of Inara's presence on the ship and in the show was kind of to bring a little bit of that Asian influence in. She's less like an American prostitute, and she's more like a Japanese geisha.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a big part of why she had that role. Maybe not why she had that role, but it was another little flavor of all of that going on in the background.
Well, and Marina Baccarin is Brazilian, I believe. So it's, at least there was, one actor that wasn't primarily just regular old school white on the main cast outside of Gina Torres, of course. But it was like they really played up Marina's eyeliner a lot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Lots of winged eyeliner looks and lots of flowing Asian looking influenced gowns, things like that.
Well, imagine how we would have been talking about this differently if Rebecca Gayheart actually got the role or kept the role as opposed to Marina. I mean, it just would have been a whitewashed role.
And it's like impossible almost to even think of it, right? Like to even really picture that, I think is difficult to do. And I think that's another testament to the creator of the show knowing, okay, this is 100% contingent upon the chemistry of my bridge crew working.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, the show will not work. So, at least he was able to recognize that right away. But that was a question that I asked on our first episode was like, oh, is her uncle like the main programming executive for Fox? And he was like, oh, you got cut on the first day, honey? Well, what was the name of the show? Like,
yeah. Yep. Let me hit that cancel button as soon as I can, honey. We'll get it figured out. I don't know. I don't know if that connection's there. But you know what? Obviously, that element didn't work. That's why she was gone. That's why they moved her out of there. But what I think really worked well in this show, just to kind of dig into the plot and hopefully help some folks find this show that didn't, is the fact that we're immediately introduced on this show to the unification war or the civil war of the independent planets and then those that are fighting for unifying this unidentified universe that we're playing around in.
right.
And this war would only take about 5 years, so in the realm of wars it was a pretty
that's not bad for a galactic war, really. Like there's a lot of distance to cover in that 5 years when they don't have faster than light travel, do they? I don't remember them having that.
I don't know if they do.
There they do. So
on war scale, that's much closer to civil than intergalactic. I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's just an interesting setting to kind of drop people into here. Because like you mentioned, we don't have sci-fi in the sense that we're kind of used to seeing. Technology kind of hits a point and it still remains somewhat believable. So I thought the unification war was a really interesting place to begin with there, because even just in the group that's on the Firefly itself, obviously we've got Mal and Zoe, who are browncoats, who are the 57th Overlanders, the fighting 57th, as I like to call them. And then we've got some of the other folks here on the ship that, actually believed in unification, because, Inara actually thought unification was okay. I mean, I know in one of the commentary tracks, Alan Tudyk says that he thinks that Wash would have been a pilot in the war, but he would have been a POW right away. But yeah, I thought it's a really interesting backdrop, and it also kind of helps continue some intrigue with Shepard Book throughout the series. So the late Ron Glass, of course, played Shepard Dariel Book, who had probably the most layers outside of River Tam. And so I honestly really miss Ron Glass, just because he was a very, very sweet man, great actor. But I always wanted to dig more into his backstory. I'm not sure if y'all had a chance to do that.
I have a little bit, and I was going to say it has been answered, but you have to kind of dig into the comic books and do a little extracurricular research to figure out what went down with him.
Yeah, wasn't there a novel written about his life before shepherding?
Yeah,
It's
there's
called
a
The
graph.
Shepherd's Tale, and
Yes.
it's I believe it's one of the newer ones. I don't remember if it's Boom Studios.
Yeah.
But I if I may, for just a moment, his performance throughout the series, I mean, it's I'm not going to say that it's on the level of Patrick Stewart's Jean-Luc Picard, but it approaches that level of like essential, I don't know what the word is, essential soul, right? Like this, that's the soul of the show, is this character who has clearly been on both sides of the law and who clearly understands the virtues of both of those sides, and who clearly makes no distinction between, what man calls law and what man calls unlawful. For him, it's all about what is actually right and what is actually wrong. How you get there is your journey. That's what it's all about. But I really wish that we had gotten a scene of him confronting the operative in the movie Serenity, because the scene in Objects in Space when Early steps over him and just goes,
Shepherd.
"That ain't a shepherd." It's like,
Oh,
this is the last episode. Why are you doing this to me? Like,
yeah.
I think that Shepherd Book had some of the most genuine interactions and relationships with the other people on the show. He had a very intense relationship with Jane and with Inara and with Simon and River, and it was almost as deep as like Wash and Zoe or Mal and Zoe, but he had that with every single person. He could see them, and he knew what they needed, and he knew he was such a good character to interact with the other people.
Yeah, and being able to do that with Jane alone says something. Jane is a very, very intense character. I know I've enjoyed listening to actually like your discussions on him, and how Jane, like, you kind of question, like, was this a smart move made by Jane? Or like, is Jane dumb? Or like, no, not really. He's a man of instinct, is what he is. And a very, very honest, outright character who you may not understand right away, but the more you kind of like spend time with Jane, the more you understand him and why he does the things that he does. And again, I don't think anyone other than Shepard really takes the time to do that in the crew.
So my ideal, like, ultimate speculative, if I could write a scene for season 2 of Firefly, it would be some situation where Jane is hanging off the back of a ship and they need to lose some weight, and the only person there to pull him up is Shepherd Book. And Shepherd Book looks him dead in the eye and says, "I know what you tried to do to that girl and her brother." And then it just cuts to black, and that's the end of season 2. I think that's because I really feel like, given the opportunity, Book would take the same steps that Mal would take to protect the people on that ship. And given the opportunity, I think he sees Jane as the biggest threat to the security of that ship. So,
well, you know what? For the folks that don't have the time to read the Shepherd's Tale, I actually have, and what I want to do is give a little bit of a content warning here. Okay, so for those of you that don't want to hear this part, we'll probably get. I'll just give you a warning right now. This is a very, very big unveiling or reveal on Shepherd Book. So his real name's not Daryl Book. His real name is Henry Evans. And very early on in the war between the Independents and what would be the Future Alliance, okay, Henry Evans was brought in to basically be a mole for the Independents. And what they wanted to do was have someone who could enter the Alliance's operations and infiltrate it at a very high level. So Henry Evans actually got the name Daryl Book because he literally killed someone with a garrote wire in an alleyway whose name was Daryl Book. And he used that moniker his entire time the rest of the way. So he ends up being a mole within the Alliance for many years. The Alliance never figures out that he is secretly screwing up all of their operations, for years. Okay. Well, it finally comes to a head where Shepherd Book, or Henry Evans, ends up being responsible for the destruction of one of the Tohoku class cruisers. Okay, so the city cruisers that we see. The IAV
60,000 people.
Well, this would be a smaller one actually. This one had 4,000 people on it. So it was the IAV Alexander. Yeah. And so I don't want to give away the entire plot of that story, but yeah, long story short, the whole reason why he even goes to become a shepherd is because he feels so much, just internal strife for the deaths of these 4,000 people. Yeah, that he finally decides, okay, let me go hang out at the Abbey for a little while and figure myself out. And that also explains why he's got the Alliance ID card that we end up seeing in the series, and he gets the much needed medical attention for it.
No questions
but it's
asked.
one of those, yeah, no questions asked. But yeah, the whole plot thread though of the Alliance finding them in space and everything, it makes me realize that this universe of theirs that they're in, even though it's vast to go from end to end, it really is one of the smallest universes I've ever seen in a sci-fi, sci-fi property. Because you mentioned Patience earlier, they hadn't done anything with Patience in a while. The Firefly team hadn't. So it makes you wonder, okay, well, how many jobs are these guys running if they, haven't run into Patience in that long? Because they're not in their 50s; they're still fairly young.
No.
So
and when you're talking to like the small size of the universe, I think even the opening of the movie Serenity does a good job of showing like how small the verse is and how much of a control the Alliance can have on it. Because they do a fun job of the universal sign becomes the Earth, and we have people leaving the Earth, and then the whole thing actually turns into like a lesson that River Tam is going under, which is like within the mind control thing. And you have basically just the Alliance's side of the war, and that's being told as absolute truth to all the children. And you see all the kids absolutely eat it up as like, yeah, I can't believe like the people on the outskirts would ever not want to like be enlightened by what we have to offer. And it just doesn't make any sense at all. So you see that like one, your ability to just make the people believe that, which you would think like on a galactic scale would be a little more difficult, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be in this universe. Like you have so many people who just buy into the Alliance was right in this series and in this movie.
Much of writing history is choosing what to leave out, I think is how the operative puts it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and part of the history of the Alliance is also controlled by just the resources and who had them, right? Because the Alliance basically pulled in all the resources that they could with the planets that were, basically DTF for this unification. And part of that unification and giving a face to it was the Blue Sun Corporation. So have you guys seen the Blue Sun food and the Blue Sun drinks and the T-shirts? They're all over
advertisements.
The show. Yeah. They're all over the universe, and so kind of like Taco Bell and Demolition Man, Blue Sun controls everything. Yeah.
No, there we go.
I have a Blue Sun shirt upstairs, but I'd wake up half my house to go trudge to get it. But Blue Sun controls so much of this struggle, right? Because the central planets, they've got their shit together. They're having a grand old time. And then you've got the outer rim planets here that don't have access to, the Blue Sun funding or, their cheap food or whatever you want to call it. So that's why they even have to rely on people like, the crew of Serenity the crew of the Serenity, because that's the only way they can keep on living. So it's kind of it's just an interesting balance that even after unification and the terraforming efforts that they did, these people on the outer rim, I mean, they could disappear and seemingly no one on the central planets would give a shit.
And not to bring it back to the same point, but it's the economics again, right? Because in the West, it's how they're using the economics to paint this as the West. Because when it was happening in the United States, all of the money was concentrated on the East Coast, and those guys, just lived a nice life and stayed home, and everything was cool. And they would send explorers out to the West, and sometimes those guys wouldn't come back, and they'd be like, "Oh, we did send somebody. Wasn't that like 5 years ago? We should probably check on him." Like, so it I feel like the economics are the main thread that really give you that sense of frontiersmanship and the struggle on the edge and scraping to get by and that kind of thing. We actually have a bingo card for our show that one of our listeners made, and they play live along with us while they watch. And Ricky D smacks his camera or microphone is on that bingo card. So if you're a Sudden But Inevitable listener and you have your card with you, go ahead and check that box.
I hit the whole desk this time.
But yeah, they go, leather, handguns, and economics. I mean, I'm glad they didn't call it that, but I might call the next season where we watch Firefly again that.
Yeah, there you go. And now it's recorded, so you can always come back to this as a footnote if you need to.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what I found funny about the Blue Sun Corporation is that, they're basically a food distributor and producer, but at the same time, they send out these humanoid, like robotic killers, right? With literally wearing blue gloves, and we see them in the comics, we see them in a couple episodes of the show, and I mean they're basically killing everything between them and the Tams. I mean it's terrifying to think that like a conglomerate that's just trying to keep people fed is also experimenting on humans and doing these horrible things, right? It's one of those threads that I thought was it was just unfortunate that it got such little amounts of airtime.
Well, and I think that those little seeds of like, living without a government and capitalism is bad and, just the government in general is not good. I know those seeds are in there and a lot of fans really latch onto them. But I was always sort of the mind that he was trying to paint a little more complex of a picture than that. Like maybe in season 1, those are all the feelings that we would get through Mal's lens. And then maybe in season 2, Mal starts to understand the intricacies of, interplanetary economics. And he's like, well, maybe there are good people in that corporation and they have a boss they can't stand, or you know what I mean? Like they would have thrown some little more subtlety and I think more facets to that character into the show as it went along. But I don't, it's one of those things like you really could point to any aspect of the show that you love and go, what if we had 30% more of that in the show? Like, would that make the show better? Or like, can I just have one episode that's focused on that? Because and I think that's, obviously that's the beauty of the show is that it exists in its own entirety as it is. But there are still 20 years later, there are still new fans coming to it going, man, what if they did make another season in it and that they could do this and they could, and these people are coming up with stuff that I never came up with or, that we haven't seen in the comics yet. And it's like, I really think it's a testament to the strength of the foundation of this show. Chemistry plus space Western equals success, I think. Like, I don't know that you could point to that equation anywhere and show it as a failure now that I think about it. So I miss it, you guys. I miss Firefly. I'm sad that it's over.
Well, you know what? That lends us kind of to a good point here, though, is to talk about some of the things that we didn't get to explore that we wanted to see. I mean, I guess off the top of your heads here, is there anything that you didn't get an expansion on that you really wanted to? And we'll maybe try to stay away from the movie, right? Just a little bit, because they do explore some things, but just within the show, anything there that you wanted to see more of?
Well, we just mentioned avoiding the movie, but a lot of questions get answered about River and her abilities and all of that in the movie, but I still think there's just so much more that you could dig into. Like that River was such a great character, and the way her brother loves her and her, not only the uncovering of her abilities, but also how she struggles with socialists and all those things. I would love to see more out of the River Tam and Simon Tam story.
So maybe even more from the academy that she attended, where they did all of the the alliance-based experimentation that we see a little bit of in the movie. But
Right, yeah. I would love to see, obviously there were terrible parts there, but they were also trying to build her into something. So there must have been some good moments when she was stuck at that academy, I would assume. And it would just,
yeah,
like River Tam, the early years or something.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Episode 1. Yeah, there was a brief moment in the comics where they talk about the first student of the academy named Silas, and Silas is just like this superhuman basically, and this guy actually ends up killing one of the blue gloved people. So they had a female, like there's a pair of 2 females that were like the blue glove folks, and then there was the male pair that we saw in the show, right? So part of them, like part of the alliance wanting to get a grip on Simon and River was based on River's relationship with Silas. And so that was one of those things that I was like, yes, I desperately want to see more of the rest of the academy, because I'm just assuming that River wasn't the only experiment. Obviously we got this Silas character, but yeah, there's so much more there that I would have loved to see discovered beyond just what we got from the film. But Jesse, what about you? What are you pining over there?
So I didn't bring this up on our episode where we covered the movie because it was specifically, I guess you could call it a partial spoiler for some of the comics. Because so what I was doing as I went through this, when you start a Firefly podcast, you get a lot of Firefly stuff on your social media. It's really weird.
Yeah. No idea how that happens.
Yeah. So, but my goal was like, okay, I'm like I've heard comedians don't watch each other's sets, right? Because they don't want to accidentally like steal a thought process subconsciously or something like that. So I didn't listen to anybody else's Firefly content. I didn't watch YouTube videos. I didn't read the comics. I didn't do any of that stuff because I was like, I don't want to have somebody else's idea and then be like, hey, I had this idea and have it not be mine.
Yeah.
But that happened anyway. So what I came up with was, I think the best, coolest evolution for the Malcolm Reynolds character would be next season or the season after is have somebody from the Alliance show up and go, hey, you're Malcolm Reynolds, right? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, dude, we have been after you for so long. I can't even tell you, but we have an even bigger issue with this guy, Niska. He thinks he's like in charge of this whole sector. And we'd actually like you to go pick up him as a bounty and bring him in. And then Mal, through having left Niska alive, somehow convinces him, hey, come with me on the ship. We're going to go do this thing. And then he just drops him in a prison. And Niska's like, I will get you, Malcolm Reynolds,
Yeah.
But like, but then they go, hey, you're pretty good at this. Do you want to be a bounty hunter? And then Serenity becomes a bounty vessel. It's sanctioned by the Alliance. They're looking for criminals. And then now Mal has the morality play of, is what this person has done that they're being hunted for bad enough for me to bring them back? Or do I go, oh yeah, he slipped my grasp right at the end. You know what I mean? Like you get to keep a lot of that same what's right and what's wrong dilemmas for Mal. Plus you put the character in a position where you never thought you'd see him, which is taking money from the Alliance because they're going to pay better than smuggling jobs, right? But now he's able to, hey, maybe now he's able to upgrade Serenity and we get a refit on the ship. Maybe the ship gets some weapons. Like maybe we just fix everything that's broken for now. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I think could have gone there could have been so many ways to go with it outside of, Mal good, government bad, this, that, and the other thing. Like, they set a lot of that up in the first season because it's one season of TV that was supposedly supposed to set up 7 seasons.
7,
right?
Yes.
So I could see where you would focus heavily on your themes right at the start. That makes a lot of sense. But I think that one of the dangers that people can fall into with the infatuation of this show is that thing of like, oh, the show wants me to hate the government and the show wants me to hate capitalism. It's like, yeah, not necessarily. Like, the show is presenting those as complex concepts to you and showing you some characters have different justifications for feeling the ways that they do about those things. They're not showing you, I don't feel like the writer is specifically trying to say, here's exactly how I feel. And if he is, then that's lazy writing. But I don't think he's doing that, and I don't think Firefly was lazily written personally. Maybe lazily casted.
Well, and I agree with you though to an extent here, because the Alliance doesn't actually get portrayed as being inherently evil. It's certain aspects of the shadow leadership of the Alliance that you have to worry about. And so it's kind of like that idea of of destroying 2 Death Stars with a bunch of people on them. Like, you just murdered millions of people. That some of these guys are just doing 9 to 5, and they're like telling Honey, yeah, I'll pick up some blue milk on the way home.
Exactly.
And so the Alliance to me was kind of like that. You've got these, like, once again, the Tohoku, city ships. Like you've got all these families and stuff that are probably living on those. So the Alliance to me is that 9 to 5 for the majority of the people that we see from the Alliance. And yeah, there's some dicks along the way. There's dicks in every company. So that's going to happen. But you know what? One thing I wanted to mention about an unexplored plot thread that I really wanted to see, and this isn't meant to be a pun, I wanted to see an episode where we meet Jane Cobb's mom, because I want to see the lady that makes those hats that a man that wears would not be afraid walking down the street. Not afraid of anyone.
Okay, let's you guys, if you're cool, let's all pick the actor for the part. Okay, so since there's no restrictions and it'll never happen and none of us have any power, I think it would have to be Kathy Bates. That's just me.
Oh man, who would I cast?
Just a minute, I'm trying to find the name of this person.
Who would I cast as Jane Cobb's mom?
No, couldn't you not seen her? Jane, get your ass back in here, boy. Like it would fit. I mean, it would be easy. It would be the easy choice, I think. But I think it would fit.
If I could have picked Katie Seagal as she's aged today, for then, I think I would have been interested in seeing that dynamic.
That's an excellent
That's a good
pick.
one.
Very no nonsense. Strong matriarch. Yeah, I dig that.
Yep.
And I could see her like having like a 14-inch knife on the mantle, but then also sewing a new hat at the same time. So
her times as an old lady for a motorcycle club definitely set the tone for that.
So if I were going to pick somebody to play Jane's mom, it would be Darlene Cates. You probably know her as the mother on What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
That movie, but I don't remember the mother.
She goes by
Mama.
Bit of a portly woman.
Else? Oh,
they would have to get a crane to get her out of the house. I think
Joe's being
at one point in time.
He's being very political in his description of her size, but yeah, honestly, she would. I mean, I think I could see that too. I could see that working out. Yeah.
I personally, I'd go with Jessica Walter. God rest her soul.
Oh yes, the late Jessica Walter.
Jessica Walter, especially her. Basically, if you've ever watched Archer, I think if she would channel Mallory Archer and basically all of her decisions, yep, that's Jane's mom.
It would be great to find out that Jane's mother sent him away. Was like,
yes,
you are too much of a screw up. Get off my homestead. I'll still send you a care package every once in a while. Like, just get out of my hair. And then he goes back and he's like, "Hey, mama." And she goes, "What are you doing here?" And then Mal's like, "Not a happy family reunion, huh?" And then we could do the credits, right? There's so much, you guys. We gotta find Firefly fan scripts and do table reads of them. If they're out there.
Oh,
yes.
Well, there is one very dark element of unused Firefly script that I always bring up with fans. And that's Inara's, I don't know if you want to call it like a death catheter, but there was an early script that they just kind of threw out that involved the Reavers, and the Reavers were supposed to actually assault Inara, and you actually see this in I think it's the first episode where she shows this little, like, it looks like a flute that's in a little box that she's looking at when like threats is imminent. Well, this little flute that she has, you insert into the female anatomy, which I think we can get what I'm going with here.
Mm.
And it's actually like a poison stick that poisons whoever has sex with her.
Wow.
So the idea that Joss
that was
Whedon,
made for Reavers? I guess, yeah.
It
this
was
is how
made
they
for-
do, yeah.
this is
Whoever's
Joss Whedon.
unwelcome.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is Joss Whedon at work here. So this was an unused plot thread, though, that ultimately she was going to be assaulted at some point, and this little, death, I guess if you want to call it like a birth control death stick of some kind.
A literal
was
claptrap, if you will.
Exactly. This was supposed to be a plot thread. I'm not saying I wanted to see it. I'm just
No.
mentioning it right now since we're on the unexplored plot threads.
Mhm.
This
Someone
was one
put that
of those
on
things.
paper. That was apparently a good idea.
But interestingly though, I could see where that evolved into Yosef Bridges' lipstick. Like I could see him
Yeah.
going like, she's got this like actual poison inside her body, like, and
Yeah.
they have to like do her to get it. And somebody was like, dude, what? And he was like, I mean, it's like lipstick, and when she kisses them, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, that's way less weird. Let's do that. Like,
yeah,
I
it's
could
like a
see-
poison ivy thing. That makes way more sense.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
same principle, right? You use the body as your defense and your offense, but it's way less icky. That's
Yeah.
that feels real Joss to me.
Yeah.
The other one that I always see brought up is, I believe he said that Inara was supposed to have a terminal illness
Yes. Yes.
from the start of the show. So part of her saying, okay, I'm leaving now at the end of the first season was because she knew she was getting closer to dying and she didn't want to be around when that happened.
Yep.
And I feel like if you watch the show with that in mind, it actually makes a lot of her scenes make a lot of extra sense. You're like, oh, I could totally see that being the subtext here. So it kind of makes me wonder if he didn't tell her, like, hey, we're not going to explore this season, but your subtext here is that your character knows she's got a ticking clock. And to give the most, elegant, beautiful, wonderful character on the show a giant dark cloud also feels very Joss to me. So
Yeah. And then just like a good Tommy Wiseau plot thread, it disappears in the movie.
just gone.
Yep.
It's
It's out of there.
definitely cancer. Oh wait,
And
nope,
she-
it's gone. We're good.
It's gone.
Also, she knows how to use a crossbow now. No big deal.
Nope.
Yeah.
And she has one.
And then she just gets mad and trashes a room for no apparent reason.
I
Well,
really
More
loved
Tommy
that.
Wiseau stuff.
The question I came in with when you guys agreed to come on, I was really interested in your thoughts on. Let's just say if we could revive the show, what are your thoughts on a revival of Firefly?
Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D. Would you like to go first?
Yeah. My personal thoughts are there's no way that you could remake this show and have it be this incredible tiny little package that it exists as now. It's like we're setting ourselves up for disappointment if we do go that route. I could see some kind of animated version. That way you have a lot of the same, you're in the same universe, but it feels distinctly different. That would be helpful for that. But as far as a live action remake, we've got 2 of the actors that have passed away since then. So there'd be recasting. And it's just the show as it is, as tragic as it is, it's this beautiful, perfect little package. It's 14 episodes, it's 1 movie, and almost everybody that gets involved with it absolutely loves it. And if you restart the series, if you either maybe go off in a different direction and don't even have the same characters or whatever, it would what's the word I'm looking for? It would sully it.
Mm-hmm. It's not like trying to make Dread 2, which should have happened already. But
Yeah, we should be on part 3, by the way.
Mhm.
But I agree with you though to an extent there, because I think the animated route or some of the route the comics went down,
Mhm.
I'm really interested in the space between the show and the movie, or maybe even some of the things that happened before episode 1, right? Like let me just see how these folks continue to live. Like that's we on other shows in this podcast, we talked about what keeps us coming back to sequels. And it's not because we think that sequels are always necessary, but it's just fun to see what our favorite characters continue to do.
It's because it's guaranteed money for the studio.
Yeah.
But that's why it's guaranteed money, is because people like to go see something that they're familiar with.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. And that's where it comes in for me. I just like to see what the characters continue to do, especially if maybe you want to disclose like personality traits or maybe something about a character that you just didn't have time to expand on. And we've talked a little bit about some of that today. But I think that's where if they were going to continue to expand on this or build out more stories, I think an animated or comic thread would make far more sense than another live action interpretation for sure.
And we actually asked Adam Baldwin about that. What would you think about an animated series? Because then you don't have most of the constraints that you would have if you were doing a live action series. You don't have to worry about the age of the actors. You don't have to worry about, COVID protocols. You don't have to worry about people getting hurt doing stunts, any of that kind of stuff. You just tell the story and you tell it with familiar voices. And I think that could be huge. And Adam Baldwin said he thinks it sounds like a no-brainer, but he did also reiterate the point that Ricky made, which was the show is a complete thing. And you could argue it's pretty close to perfect if you leave the movie out, in my opinion. So it for me, it would have to be animated. I want it to be full-on anime because that, to me, is the essence. There's your Eastern and Western culture mix right there. It gives you your new, different feel, but it's characters voiced by the actors that for the most part. You could have Book just be silently badass the entire series. In the first episode, they have Mal go, ever since Book took his, oath of silence, he sure has been working out quite a lot with Jane, because like they've shown him working out with Jane before, and they've showed him make vows towards stuff. So it's like, man, they could make that work so well, or they could have it be a running gag. Every time he goes to say something explodes, or somebody cuts him off, or Jane cuts him off, or River cuts him off and says what he was gonna say. There's so many ways that could be made really good, I think. And I really feel like with as much time that has passed and with how much just radiant love there still is for this property, you could bring in a team of creators that understand the soul and the essence of what this show is. And, sure, put one of them in charge. Have one person be in charge as a liaison to the cast to go, hey, does this feel right to you guys? We want to give you input on the feel of the show. Maybe not necessarily script control. That would be insane. But like if they were telling, just asking the actors, hey, does this feel like something Mal would do? There's no chance Nathan Fillion goes, I don't know. It's like they've all embodied those characters enough, I think. And we know that they love the characters enough to want to come back. So I really feel like, put it on Netflix, give it the same studio that just did Castlevania, and give me that super high quality, very high frames per second, very fluid anime. Give me all the stuff I love from the series. Give me River's very signature like tripod move where she holds herself up in a hallway. Give me Vera animated. Show me Shepherd Book's hair pop up because he took his ponytail out. Like, I want to see Mal turn, and I want to see that duster fly, man. Like, there's so much in the visual language of the show already. It's begging to be turned into a beautiful, ethereal anime in the vein of a Cowboy Bebop, in the vein of a Castlevania. These high quality shows really understand what it is that the audience wants from them. That's what the show was made as, and I think if you were going to jump back into it, that's the only angle to approach it from, is that angle of love.
What I actually would like to see is a video game in the same realm as the 2009 Ghostbusters game, because you've got people who would obviously jump at the chance to play the same characters again. You could continue to world build, and you've got a great playground to work with as well.
So my
I mean,
only thing there is that if I were gonna guess, I would guess that the painful additional cancellation of the mostly finished Firefly online game for which the
I
cast
know.
recorded voice lines
Yeah.
may have gotten them to the point where they're if somebody comes to them like, hey, we want to do a really cool Firefly video game, they're going to be like, yeah, we've heard that one
Yep.
before. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't blame them honestly, but I feel you 100%. Give me I would go to your point, very heavy on the narrative, make it like The Witcher, right? Like you're playing this
Yeah.
character, so you can't just do whatever you want. You have to do what that character would do. It's a very guided RPG experience. It's not on rails, it's not fully open world, but you feel like you're Malcolm Reynolds. I'd play the hell out of that.
Oh yeah. I totally.
I'm kind of feeling like a Star Wars Galaxy MMO would fit kind of interestingly. It wouldn't.
Yeah,
I don't know if it
it
gives
would
all
be
the
Star Wars.
storylines, but Jesus.
Well, hey, I mean, I think what a good thing here, just to point out, is that obviously Firefly and Serenity has an earned presence in sci-fi, right? I mean, that's my big takeaway from this is that, when I first watched Firefly, because I didn't watch it when it was on TV, of course. I was drinking Surge and playing Gauntlet Legends until like 3 a.m. So I was not watching this show on a Friday night. but I mean, I just think that for people who haven't seen it, like my wife had not seen the show until we got together. And when she saw it, she went, why didn't more people watch this? Because it's not just good sci-fi, it's just a good show. And so I thought that for a 14 episode, property like this, I think it did more for sci-fi than almost I don't know, maybe the 10 to 15 years before that point. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would say that and The Matrix were just, I mean, those are the seminal works of that age. Of those, was that like 3 years right there, 99 to 02, right? Like, because everything that came after that was, okay, it has to look like The Matrix and it has to be snarky and hilarious like Firefly, right? Like, we don't get the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool movie if Joss Whedon doesn't make Firefly, right? Like, we need the wisecracking, shit-talking anti-heroes that we can actually still get behind, for that to show up. Like, and then of course The Matrix, everybody just was like, how do we do that bullet time effect? And most people failed at it. But but you make a really great point, Mark, that it's like, it was truly seminal, and it was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It was an original thing in a time when the other original things were fast car TV show and reality competition TV show. So yeah, give me Space Western out of that list all day, every day.
Oh man. Well, tell you what, I wanted to end this episode on going back in time and looking at what people said about Firefly when it first came out. Now, have you guys dug into any of the original thoughts on this series?
So the only insight that I have into that, and I'm not saying that like this isn't enough, because this is the insight that I love. So the way that our show got connected with Adam Baldwin was through two of our listeners who were actually extras in the movie Serenity. And
cool.
They ended up being in that movie because they were very, very active on the old boards, the original Firefly fan forum on the Fox website when the show was running. And they actually met, producers and cast members on the forums and stuff like that. And so when we started our show, these two ladies found us, and they were like, hey, you guys, we are all about being brown coats. We would love to bring you along and bring you into the circle. And so one of them, Rosie, I think she sent me like 15 pages of notes from back in the day that she had kept. We went to this convention, we met the crew outside this restaurant, we were at this bar, we were at the Brown Coat Backup Bash, we went to this bar for a drink, and we, watched the show with the crew and stuff. and then all these photos of them at conventions with the crew, and like, you know, hanging out outside restaurants and just having drinks at bars and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So I get all of her real-time reactions when she was, you know, experiencing all this stuff. And then same with our other shepherd. We call them shepherds. They're our biggest supporters. Susie, who actually did connect the interview for us. She called me one night and was like, hey, I've been talking to Adam Baldwin. Do you want to interview him? He wants to talk to you guys. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, so the connection that I have to what people felt when it was first on is mostly through them and through my dad, who is like, I swore I made you guys watch this. And I'm like, I know that you made us watch the movie, but I don't think we watched the show with you. So I remember people being all about it, but I don't remember any specifics. I would have been I think I was a freshman in high school, or maybe 8th grade. Ricky, we would have been freshmen, right? In 2002?
Yes, freshman. Yep.
Yeah. Did you know anybody in school that was like, dude, Firefly?
Not Firefly, but I did see the movie Serenity in theaters. That was like 2003, 2004, 5. Okay. And I went with, you remember John, you lived with him. I think he got a bunch of us together to go see it, because I remember seeing it with John and like Nathan and Curtis and those kind of guys. So, but none of us knew what we were going into except for John. He was talking up the movie. He's like, this is amazing. And everybody else is like, yeah, you got to go watch something on Friday.
Well, it's funny you guys have kind of mentioned a little bit of everything here, because some of the reviews that I dug up on this were kind of all over the place too. So one of the oldest ones I could find actually called the Firefly series a supermodel waiting in a bus stop. And and I was like, you know what? That's a really good way to put it, because in the realm of sci-fi, yeah, yeah, makes a ton of sense.
It's overqualified and stuck taking the bus.
I mean, made sense to me. But then the exact same thread though, someone else called it forgettable, incoherent, and more of the same of what we've gotten in sci-fi. So I'm guessing that person had a methane leak under their house.
How do you know the word incoherent, but you can't understand what's happening in the show? Like,
yeah, I had the exact. My reaction was, this person's just an idiot that doesn't like any of these shows.
Yeah, but like, how do you know the word incoherent enough to use it in the correct context, but not understand what's happening in Firefly? Like, they're all they're like 3-syllable words at most. Like,
yeah. Dude, I don't know. That's why Joe and I have done this before. We've looked at reviews of other properties from the internet, and we just go, I'm just going to shut my brain off and read these things. The last one that I'll read off here, though, is this one. It says, this is an amazing series. All the characters are so well developed, it's hard to pick a favorite, and you care about each one after just a few episodes. However, I would not recommend letting your kids watch this with you the first time. I think this is a show best watch with mom or dad, fast forwarding past a few of the most iffy parts and discussing the show with your kids. Be aware, they do make up Bible verses, but it always seems to be the bad guys that do it.
Oh no!
Ooh, sick burn. Yeah. On that fun vein, though, like they're talking about like getting attached to the characters. If you could sit down or like if you could have one character in the show as a drinking buddy, or someone you're going to pal around with, who would it be?
Easy answer is Jane.
Yeah. I mean, the easy answer is Jane, right? The how do I write down what I heard and turn it into money answer is Shepherd Book.
Yeah.
I was going to say Badger, Mark Shepherd himself. I'd want to hang out with him just to see how much he gets his ass kicked going to bar to bar.
And I'd like to bring this back up. They should have had him in the movie. They should have put him in the movie instead of Mr. Universe.
David Krumholtz, I mean, he felt natural in that role. I've mentioned David Krumholtz in a couple other episodes. I mean, he's not out of place. He definitely feels like he should be Mr. Universe. So I thought he was fantastic doing that.
Well, and not to get into it, okay, because it's not my show and I don't want to do that again, but I didn't have a problem with the actor, and I still don't have a problem with the actor. The only issue I have with the character is that we got it in place of a character we knew. So that was my biggest issue with it. It's not like, this whole thing is crap. It's just like, I wanted Badger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, fair enough, man. Well, I'll tell you what, as a parting note here, interested to hear about what's next for you guys. I know you mentioned you've got some episodes to come out, but what else have you got working on right now?
So the next piece of Firefly content that we have coming out is actually going to be a special episode of Best Flicks with Ricky D, with my friend Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D, where we cover the documentary Done the Impossible, which is
Yes.
about how the fans, including the aforementioned Rosie and Susie, who featured in that documentary, including them, helped get the movie Serenity made. So we're going to talk about that with the crew, and I'm really going to push to get some input from Susie and Rosie on that. They're both very busy ladies, and very generous with all of their love and time all the time. But if we could get them to sit down with us for that episode, I think that's going to be our goal. We don't have a date planned for that quite yet, but we are on hiatus for another 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. So on June 4th, season 2 will begin, and season 2 is called The Sudden But Inevitable Re-Bop, and that means we are covering Cowboy Bebop. So we
Yes.
we wanted to find a show that fit with the aesthetic of Firefly and that keeps all of our show's core themes together, which is sharing something you love with somebody that you love that they have never cared about before. And there are multiple layers this season because both Josh and Ricky D have never seen Cowboy Bebop and are not anime fans. So we've got a double platter of crow waiting for them at the end of season 2. And I'm really excited for that. Now, there is, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the network that we are a part of, the Twist My Arm podcast network, which is run and created by my friend Josh, who's our Firefly first timer, along with Kylie. We're planning our first ever podcast network convention. And I say it that way because we've never done that before, and we're not 100% sure what that means yet. But it's basically like a big independent podcaster brainstorming session where we're going to go, hey, what worked for you guys? What hasn't worked for you guys? Here's how, and this is our pitch, for Sudden But Inevitable. If you haven't listened to Sudden But Inevitable, please go listen to it. We went from 0 to 1,000 downloads in about 100 days. And part of what we're going to talk about at TMA PodCon is how we did that with our show. Not because we're the authority on that, and not because I could guarantee you that I could do that with any show, but because it happened to us, and we would like to offer any help that we can to other indie podcasters, because I'm sure, Mark and John, you guys know, getting your name and your voice out there as an independent content creator can be difficult. So if there's anything that we can do to show, here's what worked for us, what worked for you. And it's not just us. We've got Pixie from Next on Stage 1. We've got Aaron from It's a Fandom Thing. We've got Cameron from Green Shirt. We've got Sean from Cheap Seat Reviews.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that are going to be involved in this. And we're talking all aspects, audio best practices, social media engagement, how to keep your audience once you've got your audience, things like that. So if you're interested, just go to twistmyarmpodcast.com. You'll get a pop-up right away. Twistmyarmpodcast.com is actually the easiest way to get a hold of all of the shows on the network, because we're all there. We all have our own page, and it's all central in one location. You can also watch our live streams and listen to our episodes there. So it's definitely the easiest one-stop shop for everything. And beyond that, I can't wait to jump back in, you guys. Like I want to say thank you, because I haven't been on a podcast for like 2 weeks, and it's kind of killing me. Yeah, it's starting to hurt. Like, I'm texting the group every couple days, like, "Hey guys, what are we doing tonight? And like, does anybody need graphics? Can I do a voice? Like, what do you need? Can I get a voiceover?" So really excited to get back in, and I want to say thank you again, you guys, for having us on, because it's I've had a great time, and I really enjoy being able to talk about some of the stuff surrounding the series that doesn't really fit with the experience of introducing 2 first-timers to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to bring them through episode by episode, but we might not talk about the themes of the series at length because we got to get to the next episode. So thank you so much for this opportunity, you guys. I've had a blast.
Yeah, dude, Joe and I were kind of like, we were both kind of foaming at the mouth when y'all were interested in joining us, and so we can't thank you enough for taking the time. Seriously, this has been absolutely amazing, and I'm just happy we had some big fans of the show too to share it with. So once again, thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Jesse and Ricky D, for helping us dissect 14 episodes of the Firefly verse and the impact it had on modern sci-fi. If you like this episode, please pay our friends a visit at TwistMyArmPodcast.com and make sure to check out their companion shows, Quest Me and the Sudden But Inevitable Rewatch. As we mention often, please comment, subscribe, and leave a review. Not only does it warm Joe and I's heart, but it apparently also works in tandem with Al Gore's rhythm, which we don't understand, but apparently is important to independent podcasts like us.
If you're wondering where our journey across the verse is headed next, we're dusting off our musical knowledge, or lack thereof, and breaking down the musical scores of both Firefly and Serenity. Our friends Chris and Leslie of the Measuring the Score podcast join us to interpret the major differences between the TV and movie entries in the series. Until next time, which is literally only 2 days away, keep on dissecting.